Greetings and welcome back to another video of the Twilight Wars browser app series. Today's video is going to be focusing on the cans and can'ts of the Twilight Wars browser app. The motivation for this video came to me when I noticed that, especially with newer players that come into the app, there isn't exactly like a central location for what the Twilight Wars app does, and especially what it doesn't do. So I wanted to take some time to put this into a video in its current state to give some information of these features and what they can and can't do. So I wanted to start with basically what is the goal of Twilight Wars, what it does. Well, originally, the motivating purpose for creating Twilight Wars was to have a fully automated game flow. And so what the app can do for players in this respect is it takes out rules interpretation, it takes out bookkeeping, so players don't have to worry about whose turn is it next, are they doing things in the correct order. That is the main, I would say, the main can do of the Twilight Wars app. It acts as, an ultimate kind of overseer. Similar to like if you've played any other board games online where you just don't really have to worry about rules. Like a very basic level of this would be chess, right? If you're playing in real life, you have to make sure that your opponent and yourself are making legal moves, right? You can't move a bishop horizontally, vertically, etc. Now, chess is a fairly simple example because the rules are so finite and simplistic. But in a game like Twilight Wars, especially to newer players, these things can become burdensome. So that's the main can of the app. In terms of the actual games, one of the common things, I think misconceptions of setting up a game, especially to players who are new, is what this public checkbox does when you're setting up a game. So what Twilight Wars can't currently do is create public lobbies. So you create a game, and if you're the only one sitting there without any invites, your game will never start. So you actually can only set up games through an invite system. Similar to the way it works in real life. If you're just sitting there with a board of Twilight Imperium 4 in front of you by yourself, no one's going to come play with you. You gotta, you gotta invite friends to come play. So what this public checkbox does is it means the game is viewable to anybody. So if you create the game without the public checkbox, then only the people in the game can view it. Otherwise, if you checkmark that, you can invite people, whoever you want, by giving them the game link to come view the game. Another big can is that Twilight Wars gives you the option to play asynchronously or synchronously, or a combination of the two. This was another big original implementation design. It was the ability to play synchronously, which brings me to another can, which is to have multiple games going at once, right? It's not unheard of to have users who have more than 5 games going at a time, sometimes upwards of 10 and more. So if you really are into that, you can have multiple games going. Now, that being said, with talking about an automated rule system and whatnot, one of the things that Twilight Wars can do, as I hop into a sample game here, is it's never going to be able to implement every single rule as written. And this has to do with the complexity of timing windows and how cumbersome these can be from an automated point of view. I guess in theory, you could implement every rule as written, but I think what would happen is you would sacrifice a lot of game flow, especially in the asynchronous setting. See, I think that the problem is implementing things rules as written is fine because you can literally do that in real life. And that would be similar to playing a synchronous game in Twilight Wars. Problem is how drawn out an asynchronous game can be if you have every single timing window, every single player being asked to do something in every situation. And if I think about this, the most obvious example was when we originally implemented the promissory note, which one? Let me see. Trade agreement, right? When we had originally implemented this, whenever a trade was completed, there was, well, not whenever a trade was completed, but whenever this player replenished all their commodities, every single player in the game would have to be asked if they wanted to play trade agreement, right? Now, if you're playing like that in real life or synchronously, it's really easy to just pass that process along quickly. But even in a synchronous setting, having each player to have to click pass and go through all that can be quite cumbersome. That was our experience when we had our playtesting groups or when the app was relatively small. So one of the things we had to do there was to make trade agreement automatically activate, to completely automate that process so you don't have the option whether to play it or not. And in the end, what we saw was this is opened up for a much more enjoyable experience. And so that's an example of what I mean, is that we'll never be able to implement the rulebook exactly as it is because the game just wouldn't be fun in a lot of these scenarios. So these slight deviations occur. And most of these deviations occur with a TW symbol, as you can see, for example, beside ambush. So you'll know when we have specifically changed something for the sake of what I would call the flow of the game. Another thing Twilight Wars can't do, well, this kind of falls under the category of can and can't, is it provides a selective undo system. So, I mean, this depends, the perception of this depends on what kind of play group you usually play with in an IRL setting. I mean, you could imagine playing this for the first time in real life. You want to probably be pretty lenient with, when you do something that, okay, it can be undone just for the sake of like teaching new players. Twilight Wars has a very select spot, or rather a very select group of spots in the game that can be undone. For example, activation of a strategy card can be undone. So, I think we added some undos, especially for the biggest pain points, like tactical activation of systems. But we're never really going to have the chance, at least in the short term here, to implement an all-encompassing undo system. So Twilight Wars, it has a reputation, and rightfully so, of being a strict teacher. So, if you're having trouble using the interface, I would always recommend using the help button at every step if you're new. That will help avoid mistakes. Otherwise, the first couple of games are a bit of a learning curve. Now, another thing that Twilight Wars can do, which is nice, is we have the ability to provide our user base with frequent updates. So what does this mean? Well, if you were here for the original launch of basically we got out of a beta phase, you can see we've had 43 major updates since that we got out of the beta phase, and each of these major updates has minor updates as well, 1.42, 1.42a. So what this does is allow us to provide quality updates, bug fixes, and introduce new game components on a frequent basis, right? And a lot of the times, if we see some interesting suggestions in our Discord user feedback channel, which you can get to our Discord here, the app, if you were to compare it to 1.00, there's a huge difference. Not just in terms of game components, but in terms of the quality of life within the app, what you have access to, how information is displayed, how the game flows. So in that sense, Twilight Wars can offer us continued improvements through quick and easy measures of this update system, right? So that's a nice thing it can do. Another big plus is Twilight Wars has a repository of games and statistics. So if you go into the actual app, let me see. We'll go into the actual app here. Go into our actual stats, right? Twilight Wars has 636 completed games as of the making of this video. And while the only thing shown on here is the win rates of each faction in different player modes, we actually track every single event for every single game. So, for example, dice rolls. So in theory, Twilight Wars could create statistics based on combats. So it acts as this great repository for statistics and game history as well, right? So in your profile, you're able to view all your completed games with a complete backlog. Now, you can't play through the game like a replay, but it's still there for you. And I think probably in the future we might look to extending, how we're showing statistics, maybe in a more complex way that deals with not just win percentage. It's possible. Yeah, that's those are the main points I guess another thing I forgot to mention with the updates is, being able to add in these preset maps is nice as well. Originally, we started with no preset maps. It was always just a build galaxy. So one of the nice things about these updates is we can continue to add in these preset maps. We originally started with these 3, and I think we've added in 3 more since then. So that's nice. But yeah, I just wanted to go over that high-level overview of some of the things the app can and can't do. As it continues to evolve, some of those cans might become cans. Maybe one day we'll have like an open public lobby system and perhaps a ranked mode for gameplay, right? That would be pretty interesting. But again, if you have ideas or suggestions, head on over to our Discord, where we take all kinds of user feedback and suggestions. But that's going to do it for this video. So hopefully that cleared up some things on what the app can and can't do. Otherwise, keep looking for videos in the future and enjoy the rest of your day.